welcome to another Unity from Scratch tutorial for beginners. In the last tutorial we created a shooting mechanism whereby the player could run around in this warehouse scene and shoot out large bowling ball sized objects. In this tutorial, we're going to build on that and explode the objects. So what I'm assuming you've already done, since I asked for it in the last tutorial, is that you have imported the detonator package, which is in the asset store here, that you can bring in. Okay, so continuing on, what we need to do to make our spheres explode, first of all, before we do that though, we're going to make them stick to the place that they hit. So create a new C# file with create C# and let's call it sticky bomb, which I've got down here. I've already made one. Just change that view and let's open that up. And what I've got in here is really quite simple. I've got a exposed variable for the explosion prefab, which we'll work with in a moment. So you can add that in now or a bit later if you like. The important thing is this function here. So we're using the onCollisionEnter function. This will get fired by the sphere when it hits another collider. So in this case, if it hits the floor or it hits the wall or something, this will fire this function. And then what it's going to do is grab hold of the rigid body of the object that this code is attached to and turn is kinematic to true. What that does is it stops the rigid body of the sphere object interacting inside that physics system and basically turns off the forward momentum or the reactions that are happening through the collider bouncing between things. And that will stop that sphere dead in its tracks as soon as it hits something. So when it hits the wall, it will just stop and freeze there. Okay, so once you've typed this in, just save that code. And then what you're going to do is drag and drop it onto the sphere. So if you select the sphere prefab, you can get this code and just drag it and drop it over. And you can see that I've already got it there. Now I've already added in an explosion prefab, but you don't have to worry about that for now. We're just sticking the object onto somewhere in the environment. Okay, so now when we hit play, and we run around and shoot something, the fire button, it will stick to whatever it hits. Okay, so the physics is no longer working on those objects. Okay, so that's working. The next step is to create the explosion itself. So if we go back into the script, what I'm going to do now is invoke an explosion in 5 seconds. So we could in here instantiate our explosion prefab, but then it would happen immediately. So it wouldn't give you any time between shooting it, hitting the wall, and then exploding. But if you use what's called the invoke function, then it will call a function in so many seconds. So let's write that function first. Down here, void explode. And that function is going to instantiate the explosion prefab. And we're going to instantiate it at the same place that we have our sphere. So it'll be at this.transform.position and this.transform.rotation. Now that instantiation will cause the explode thing to happen because the prefabs for the explosions that we are using have all their own code inside it. So we don't have to do anything except to create an instance of that explosion prefab in the world. But what we do need to do is destroy our sphere object when that explosion happens. Otherwise it will explode and then the sphere will just be left sitting there. Now it's very important when you destroy the object that you go this.gameObject. Otherwise you'll just be destroying this, which will destroy the script itself rather than the object that it's attached to. Okay, so that's all we need to do there. Save that and go back into Unity. Now let's grab a sphere out of here and just put it into the scene so that we've got one in there. And while it's in the scene, we can see this exposed explosion prefab. Okay, now you want to look down through your detonator explosion package that you installed before and go into the prefabs and find one in here. Now the detonator Insanity actually has everything attached to it, all the different effects that you can get. So you drag and drop one of those onto this explosion prefab like I've got here. And that will cause that explosion to occur in 5 seconds, which reminds me we haven't actually coded that part. So now that we've got the explosion prefab attached, we can actually delete this sphere after we hit apply. Because this sphere is created from the prefab of the sphere, we can make a copy in here, edit it, and as long as we hit apply, all those changes will go back to that template sphere that is sitting right here. Okay, you've got to remember that this is not the same as this. This, when it's in the world, is a copy of what this was. If we change this without hitting apply, it doesn't change it back to here. So it's not like it doesn't save it back down into the prefab. But now that we have hit apply, we can actually delete that sphere out of the scene. Now the last thing I want to do is just open up that sticky bomb code, and we want to invoke this explosion to occur. So we haven't put any code to make this happen. So the function is invoke, and you give it the name of the function inside double quotes. And make sure you spell it exactly the same with the same capitalization. Then after the double quotes, there's a comma, and then the number of seconds before the explode will happen. So let's make that 3, because when you're testing it, 5 seconds is a long time. Okay, so now save that. Let's go back into Unity and let's try this out. So I'm going to run it, going to run over to the wall and put a sticky bomb on and then just wait for it to happen. Now notice the explosion took care of itself and it deletes itself and destroys all the bits and pieces because that's what's in that particular prefab. But our code that destroys our sphere also does it. Okay, so you can go overboard like that if you wish. All right, so that's pretty much it. Now, if you've downloaded the detonator package from the asset store, you might find that you get a whole bunch of pink planes coming up in the scene, and that's because one of the shaders that's in there has an error in it. And needs to be updated for these new versions of Unity. So what I will do for you is actually put a new version of that shader code on my resources area on the website that you can grab that and replace the same file in your project to get rid of that pink. Okay, and so that's how to create a timed explosion with your sticky bomb. Thanks for listening.